Are we on? There we go. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, it is an honor to be here today. You know, I preach in a different church just about every Sunday. I'm a walker around, and I can already tell that's going to get in the way. Every Sunday, I'm either in the bulletin or, as Jason did, I'm introduced as Dr. Chris Lieber. It's the only time in the week that anybody ever refers to me as doctor. My wife hardly ever refers to me as doctor. Nobody at work. But I want you to know, as a Baptist preacher, Jason has his doctorate, that we understand what it means to be a preacher and have a doctorate. And it kind of goes like this story. There was a preacher moved to town. He had a little kindergarten daughter, went to school the first day. And the teacher said, "This is Shelley, Dr. Johnson's daughter." Now, the teacher didn't say what kind of doctor he was, just said it was Dr. Johnson's daughter. Well, at recess, all the kids gathered around her to get to know her and said, well, what kind of doctor is your dad? Is he a foot doctor? Is he a heart doctor? What kind of doctor is he? And she said very apologetically, oh, no, you don't understand. He's not the kind of doctor that can do you any good. So we understand where that's coming from. I want you to turn to the second chapter of the book of Mark. You know, I remember this church. Back during the Hank Scott years, I was out here, back when it was a field. I remember it being out in the middle of nowhere, and boy, nowhere left, because everything is around here. And I've known Hank and his son, and then his grandson was in school with Jason and my son, and so have known his beginnings here, and it's just so wonderful to see what has happened here through the years and how God has blessed this place in so many ways. I posted on my Facebook post yesterday that I would be here, but I started out by saying, how can there be anything bad about anything that has the word bacon in it? So anyway, it is good to be here with you. This has always been an interesting story to me. The second chapter of the book of Mark, the first 12 chapters, because of our short time today, I'm not going to read it. And I feel quite confident that you know about this story. Maybe you can read this afternoon, but it's that story that we have known ever since we were beginners or primaries. You know, those years, if you remember those terms. I remember a teacher telling this story. I remember the picture that she held up of kind of a square adobe-looking house with steps up the side. That was years ago, wasn't it? And I remember that today. But let me just kind of paraphrase that story. Let me kind of give you a brief. That was a story about these four nameless men who brought their friend to Jesus. Jesus had gathered at a home in Capernaum, and he was having discussion with the religious leaders, and they knew that he would be healing. And so these four men got their friend who was paralyzed and brought him to Jesus. When they got there, they couldn't get in. They couldn't get through the door. There was such a crowd. Well, they thought that's not going to stop us, so they climbed up on the roof, tore a hole in the roof, and lowered their friend to Jesus. And when they lowered him to Jesus, Jesus said, son, your sins are forgiven. Well, the religious people who were there, the Pharisees, scribes and Pharisees, they said, well, who can forgive but God alone? And Jesus said, well, just to prove to you who I am, I'm going to do both. I'm going to heal his body, and I'm going to save his soul. And he did. He got up and he walked out in front of everyone. And the last line there in the 12th verse says, and we'd never seen anything like that before. Isn't that a great line? Wouldn't you have loved to have been there that day to see what's going on? As I thought about this chapter or these 12 verses, I've always had some lingering thoughts. Number one, I wonder how different this story might have been told had it been told by the guy that owned that house. You're getting it. He had a hole torn in his roof that day. I'm not sure he was rejoicing with everything that was going on there. And I've also been puzzled by, why are these nameless men? Now, this is a real story that happened. And many times we call it that. That's the name, the story of the four nameless men. In a book, the Bible, that goes to great lengths to name people. In my morning reading the past couple of weeks, I have been dragging through Chronicles. And, it's nothing but names. his mother was this and his daddy was this and he did this. I mean, it goes to great lengths to be sure that we know who that person was. And why I don't have an answer for this, folks, why we don't know their names. I've often been puzzled by that. And I've often wondered if the people that were waiting in line to be healed, they had been there for a while. These 4 men showed up and they thought, well, we'll go up on the roof. But in the minds of those people in line, what do you think they were thinking? In our vernacular, what were they saying? Yeah, they were saying that they butted in line. Well, we hope that Jesus stayed around and healed those and that had waited in line. But this morning, I'd like to share with you 4 quick thoughts about this passage, and to discover and to talk a little bit about the 4 things that these guys knew, the 4 things that these guys valued. What were things that were important to them that they demonstrated in their action? If you're taking notes, and I hope you will take a note or two, the first thing I want us to understand is that these 4 men, they valued one person. They valued one. They saw the importance of one. They took time to bring their one friend to Jesus. They didn't wait till they had a crowd. You know, it's not worth it just to bring one. We're busy people. We got things to do. Let's wait till we can get a group to make the most out of it. They valued one. Unfortunately, I think in our Western culture, sometimes we don't value one. I'm not going to get involved in this thing unless it's got enough, unless it's got momentum. Count me in if it's a big deal, but just for one, I'm not going to do that. We all know that one can make a difference, can it? You've seen that happen, where one person can make such a big difference. One can make a difference. I remember my youngest son, who's now 40, but when he was a junior high, older elementary, he was very short. In the 6th grade, he was in a school with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. But as an 8th grader, he was the shortest person in his school, shorter than any of the 6th graders. Oh, it wasn't a good thing. We took a bunch of his buddies to Six Flags, and you know there's certain rides that got the guy holding the hand out, unless you can, well, out of all of his buddies at his birthday party, he didn't get to ride 1 inch. Have any Texas Ranger fans here? Maybe a few that keep up with it. You know, our closest we've ever got to a World Series was pulled from us because of one fly ball that Mr. Cruz missed. We could have said that we had a World Series championship team there in the Dallas area, but one out made the difference. One can make a big difference, and these guys valued one. How did you come to Jesus? I came to Jesus on a Sunday night. I was about 13 in January. Just me, just one. That was the night that I really felt like I knew that God was speaking to my heart, but that was the night that I felt, I'm going to do something about this. And I walked down the aisle of that little church in Mesquite, Texas, and gave my life to Christ. Just one. It was just one. But what did the Bible say about what the angels did that night? They rejoiced. They were happy because of one. One is important, and I think the Bible helps us to understand that. Even the life of Jesus. Think about the life of Jesus. In your mind right now, scroll through the stories of Jesus and his encounter with people during his short ministry on earth. Are you thinking about those stories? How many of those stories involve Jesus and one other person? The woman at the well, Zacchaeus, the woman with the issue of blood. On and on, more that you're thinking about. If it's important to Jesus, shouldn't it be important to us? He valued one, we should value one. Second thing I want you to know about this passage is that these guys valued cooperation. They valued cooperation. They understood the principle that all of us is better than one of us. That working together we can do more. They found their identity not in their individuality, but in their cooperation. They found their identity in cooperating together. One of them couldn't have brought their friend to Jesus. Two of them, no, three. You know, just imagine there's a hole in this roof and he's lowering his friend down, and he's about halfway, and somebody in the crowd shouts out, "Hey, Mr. Paralytic, which one of those four is your best friend?" He'd be hard pressed because he needed all of them. He needed all four of them at that time. Cooperation. They knew the importance of cooperation. You know, I'm a Baptist. I am proud to be a Baptist in the true biblical sense of pride. Proud to be a Baptist. I know that there are many churches that have felt like they need to take the name Baptist off of their church and feel like that's for a valid reason, and I will respect the church's decision, right to make whatever decision they want to make. But I just like being a Baptist, you know, and I like the name on the church to be Baptist. You know, when I go to the grocery store and I get a can of beans, it says beans on there. I got a pretty good confidence that when I get home and open it up, what's going to be inside? Beans. Well, if you got Baptist on the sign, you can pretty good idea what you got going inside in that sense. But I'm proud to be a Baptist for many reasons. Number one, Baptists still say this book is real. This is true. This is without error. The miracles happen. Baptists are one of the few fleeting evangelical groups that still hold to that tenet of 100%. This is true. Truth without any mixture of error. You know, we started that way back in 1609. Smith and Helwys, when they separated from the Puritans, from the Church of England, and they found out when they finally could read the Bible for themselves, because prior to that, the religious leaders and the priests, the Pope read the Bible to them and told them what it says. Now that they had copies that they could read, they were saying, wait a minute. You've been telling us this, but there's nothing about that in this book. And after they discovered many things that they had been told that weren't necessarily true in Scripture, they said, you know what? They didn't even call themselves Baptists back then. But our early forefathers said, we're going to build whatever we do on this book, 100%. And I'm proud to be a Baptist because of that. But I'm proud to be a Baptist because of the way we cooperate together. These guys cooperated. I am proud to the way that we cooperate. And we've already talked about that today. And Jason talks about that, the importance of our cooperation. Baptists have been able to understand that value. We've been the envy of evangelicals all over the world because of our ability to do things like the cooperative program, where we pool our money together, and by that we're able to do some great things. Now, I rattled off a bunch of statistics earlier, almost to the point that your eyes were rolling back, and I could do more, trust me, I've got more. But you know, it's really the stories about lives changed that really challenge our hearts, isn't it? When we know that there's a face and a name to the difference that our giving has made, the generosity has made a difference. Tell you a quick story about the difference that the cooperative program made in this state to one family that we can identify. The story that I'm going to tell you started back in 1933 out in Big Spring, Texas. There was a young girl, her name was Ella Taylor. At 8 years of age, her mother died. Now, her father was alive, but he had a lot of problems, had a lot of emotional, mental problems, the kind of things probably if they knew back then what we know today, pill therapy could have probably fixed, but they didn't have that back then. It became evident to that community that Mr. Taylor wouldn't be able to take care of those kids. Well, the Taylors weren't Christian, they weren't Baptist, they had no faith connection at all. But there was a Baptist pastor in that city at the East 4th Street Baptist Church who knew about the cooperative program. It was pretty new back then. And he knew about Texas Baptist and an orphanage that they had started in East Dallas called Buckner Orphans Home. You've heard of Buckner. Today it's more than just, it's not even an orphanage anymore. It's an international missions agency literally all over the world. But back then it was a pretty good sized orphanage located in the eastern part of Dallas County. That pastor drove Ella in his car to Dallas and placed her at the Buckner Orphans Home at 8 years of age. Well, within just a few months of this, on the other side of the state in Kilgore, there was another 8-year-old. This young boy's name was James, and he was standing at the edge of the grave of his father. Now, his mother had died a year previously in Arkansas, and the father had moved the family to Texas to get a new start. But it didn't happen. It didn't work that way. His father got sick, and he died. So there was James, no place to go. Well, this time it was the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Kilgore who knew about the cooperative program. It was new about the Buckner Orphanage, and he took James and placed him in the Buckner Orphans Home. So James and Ella came to that orphanage at the same age, within just a few weeks of each other. You would suspect, and you would be correct, they knew each other. They grew up together in elementary school, in junior high school, and in high school, they became boyfriend and girlfriend. They had a little romance. However you do that in an orphanage, I'm not sure, but they did that. And they fell in love, and when you left the orphanage, which you left the orphanage when you graduated from high school, you were on your own. That was your time now to start your life. And soon after they graduated from high school and left the orphanage, they got married. Now, I think we have a picture of them. Right there is a picture of James and Ella about the time they graduated from high school and about the time they got married. Well, they got married, moved to East Dallas, not too far from Fair Park and the Cotton Bowl, if you're familiar with that part of town. Bought a little home there, started their careers, joined a little Baptist church there, began as laymen to be deeply involved in that church, just following the training that they'd received at Buckner. And then they started their family. And do you know what was a product of their marriage just a few years later? Me. I've just told you the story of my mom and dad. You don't have to convince me that this thing works, do you? Baptist provided a place for my mom and dad to have food, lodging, health care, education, all those great things. Baptist did that. The cooperative program did that. And as great as those things are, and they are great, food, lodging, clothing, all that, they're wonderful. The most important thing that Baptists provided for my mom and dad was an opportunity to meet Jesus. Their lives weren't on a trek to find the Lord, surely could have happened, but when they got to Buckner, in that influence of all of those people, it was going to happen, and it did, and they trusted Jesus. And what did they do with that faith? They passed it down to me, and to my brother, and to my two sisters. Let's see that next slide. It's a picture of the Liebrams in the 60s going to church. Yeah, that's me in the white shirt with the butch wax front there. Took about a half a jar of Sunday to get that thing to stand up like that. But we were deeply involved in our church, and I loved it. It was a great part of my life growing up. Well, what did I do with it? What did my brother and my two sisters, what did we do with that? That faith that was handed down to us? We passed it on to our children and now to our grandchildren. Let's see that last slide. That's the whole Liebram clan. Those are every descendant of James and Ella Liebram. There are 29 in that picture. Mom is right there in the middle in a chair. This is back in 2015. She passed away about a year and a half after that. So she and Dad are in heaven today. But those are all of their kids, grandkids, and a great-grandkid mixed in there. Everyone in that picture who's of age, everyone is a believer. Everyone is a part of a Baptist church. That's kind of good. Well, let me tell you, there was one family that slipped off to the Presbyterians while we weren't looking, okay? But that happened because of Baptists and their investment in the cooperative program. It didn't just change 2 lives. It's 29 and counting. Third thing I want to share with you quickly as we move on because of time. These guys valued innovation. They were innovative in their approach. You know, they got to the house and they couldn't get in. And it would have been very easy for them to say, we tried, look at the crowd, we can't get past, we'll try another time. That paralytic would have been still grateful for the fact that they tried. But those guys wouldn't take no for an answer. And they said, there's got to be another way. Let's think outside the box. And one or all four of them said, hey, let's go up and poke a hole in the roof and lower him down. That was innovative. That was thinking outside the box. Folks, if we are going to continue to reach people, we have to be innovative in our approach. And I know many times in a group of Baptists this age, my age, when we use the word innovation, you say, oh, they're going to change something else up at the church. Well, we have to be willing for those things to happen. Because the way I came to Jesus is not the way my dad came to Jesus. Or the way I came to Jesus is not the way my son came to Jesus. It always is changing. And that change might be uncomfortable for us. But you know what? I'm a grandfather. I am willing to be uncomfortable in my church if it means there's a better chance that my grandkids will come to know the Lord. I'd hate to think that I stood in the way of that because I didn't want change. Quickly, the last thing I want you to know about these guys is that they understood that it's going to cost for people to come to Jesus. It just flat cost. Now, can't get around it. When you say cost, your mind goes to money, and certainly that is one of the things. It does cost money. It cost for people to come to Jesus. But it cost more than money. What did it cost in this story? Well, it cost one guy a roof, didn't it? It cost 4 men a day. Was it a Saturday? Was it a work day? What was it? But it cost them that. It always costs for people to come to Jesus. Quick story, then I'm through. You're familiar with the River Ministry of Texas Baptist. It's a program started 50 years ago where we highlight all the way from Brownsville to El Paso, right along the river, kind of 25 miles either side of the river. Elman House started that 50 years ago, and today we still continue that work. We have 15 missionaries that you help fund all along that river. Medical, dental, pastors, all kinds of different missionaries all along that river. Many of the churches on both sides of the borders have attached to it a medical unit or a dental unit that during the week people will come there. Not only will they have their physical needs met, but their spiritual needs will be met there also. And it's just been an amazing ministry that throughout the years. Several years ago, one of our missionaries was taking a load of medical supplies across the border in a pickup truck. Medical supplies that were destined for one of those clinics. And he crossed the border, as he'd done many times, and approached the Mexican border guard crossing. And for some reason, that guard said to him, I can't let you go across today. Well, our missionary had done this dozens of times, maybe even hundreds, but certainly dozens of times. He knew the people on both sides of the border, the guards on both sides. And he knew this guard on the Mexican side. He said, well, this is crazy. Why won't you let me do this? Well, it wasn't the guard that had made that decision. It was somebody up line who had given him the orders to not let these medical supplies get in. Our missionary said, this is just crazy. Our people need those, and I can't understand why you won't let me bring them over. You're not going to shoot me if I keep going, And the Mexican guard said, no, I wouldn't do anything drastic like that. But I've been told that I can't let you cross, but that if you insist and you continue to cross, that I'm supposed to follow you to wherever you go, to whatever church you go to, find that pastor and arrest him and put him in jail. Well, when our missionary heard that, he wasn't going to let that happen, so he turned around and came back. A couple of days later, he was at a meeting where that pastor of that church where he was headed was in the meeting. And he told that pastor this story. And he said, that guy told me that if I kept going and came to your church with these supplies, that he was going to arrest you and put you in jail. That pastor said very soberly, very deliberately back to our missionary, he said, I want you to get those supplies. We need them. And I want you to go back to the crossing guard. And if it is safe, I want you to just keep on going and bring us those supplies. And then he said, I haven't had the opportunity to preach in that jail for over 2 years. Did he understand that it would cost for people to come to Jesus? Now, I'm not at all implying he'd have been there for 10 years or even, it'd have been days probably. I'm just days he'd be in jail, as if that's nothing. He'd been robbed of his liberty. But he understood that it costs for people to come to Jesus. Well, this is a great story, and I hope you'll read it, Mark 2, 1 through 12. But these 4 things that you understand that these guys valued: one, they valued cooperation. They were innovative in their approach. And it was all said and done, they knew that it costs for people to come to Jesus. Would you stand with me as you bow your heads? Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your word and all that it has to say. Father, I pray that your word will not return void as you've promised, and that if there are those today here who need to make a decision, maybe it's just a decision to come forward and kneel at this altar, that they would do that. But we give you this time of invitation as a time of worship.